Welcome to Merkaba Chakras, where we talk Buddhism in the fifth dimension.
Welcome to another episode of Merkaba Chakras podcast. There are interviews that are given as a gift, and this is one for me. Now, today I get the privilege to talk to Zen monk and author, Dr. Stephen Hairfield. Now, Dr. Hairfield is also an alumni of my college, the University of Washington. So go dogs! Yay!
Go
Yeah,
dogs.
go dogs.
Yeah.
Anyway, so he also has a doctorate in metaphysics. Now, Dr. Hairfield has much knowledge to share, but for today, he will tell us his experience reading 2,000-year-old Buddhist scrolls about the life of Jesus as a child, learning metaphysics and consciousness in his childhood Buddhist monastery, and his life after the crucifixion, when he returned back to the homage of his monastery with his cousin, John the Baptist, his best friend, Thomas, and his supposed girlfriend or wife, Mary Magdalene. So with that, welcome, Dr. Hairfield.
Well, good morning. Thanks for having me. A lovely one. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, it's an honor for me. So this one is really a gift for me that the teachers have blessed me with. So I'm just so thankful. But I love to talk about master teachers, and we have so many in the Buddhist tradition. And there are many luminaries to learn from in how to enjoy the Dharma best. So through synchronicity, my teachers led me to you to tell your story of how you fact-checked the life of Jesus, whom Buddhists, Muslims, Jainists, Hindus, and many others in the area revere as Issa, a Buddhist monk. So I have a lot of questions. And before I get to these questions about Jesus, Issa is how we know him, can you tell us your story for how you got into this work in the first place?
Well, my short answer is by seeming accident, but because I don't necessarily believe in accidents, that everything in this life and what we call reality serves a purpose. I was in my senior year, knew I was going to graduate, had taken my finals, and I had learned earlier in Southeast Asia to follow my urges when I got them. And I had this overpowering urge to go to India. And like I said, I knew I was going to graduate and decided to follow that urge and went to India. Had no idea where I was going, what I was even doing there, but I thought it was there. And I began to travel north, and again, just following what I felt. And then found myself on the northern fringes of the Punjab, which is the desert of northern India, and was sitting under the shade of a tree and sipping tea. And from behind me, a voice said, "We've been waiting for you." And I didn't figure they were talking to me, because who knew I was in India in the first place? Not even my family knew I was there. And then the next thing I heard just kind of, blew my mind, as I think it would anybody, because the same voice said, "Your name is Stephen, is it not?" And then I looked around for, I humorously share, Rod Serling, didn't see him, thinking I was on the Twilight Zone. And I slowly turned around and looked, and the softest brown eyes I think I'd ever seen in my entire life, even to this day. And I looked at him and said, "Yes, my name is Stephen." And he said, "We've been waiting for you." And I looked at him and said, "How did you know I was here?" And his next answer also surprised me. because he said, we began concentrating on your energy about 6 months ago, which, by the way, was how long I'd been having that urge to go to India. Excuse me. And I looked at him and said, okay. And then he said, you're here to learn. And you're here to learn about one known as Issa. And I had no idea who that was at the moment. And I said, Yeshuah? And he said, yes. He said, the one you know as Jesus. Now, I was raised Catholic, so you can imagine my shock. I went, really? And they said, yes. So I thought, okay. And I followed him to a monastery called Darjeeling. And that's where my education began.
Right, right. And let me ask you something. 'Cause for a lot of people in the West and in different places, they're not very familiar with this concept of tuning into your energy and expecting you. So, can you explain how the Lama and the monks at Yeshua's monastery were able to expect your energy? You know, can you explain that a little
Well,
bit further?
that's quite a lengthy answer, but I'll attempt to keep it somewhat shortened. Every single one of us as individuals, our energy type, if you will, is as unique as our fingerprint, meaning that your energy type, there's only one of you. And without going through all of it, well, how do you explain this? Go ahead. I'm
Okay,
just
I'll explain
attempting to
how I
figure out.
know it. I'll
Okay,
explain how I know it, and then
well,
please
I'm
fill in
thinking
blank.
maybe I'm okay. Go ahead.
So my understanding of everybody's energy field is everybody has a unique energy signature. It's like your vocal DNA.
Yes.
And they've already proven in science that everybody has a unique frequency.
Yes.
And that frequency is the same frequency unique to them, and it can go up in intensity or down in intensity depending on different factors about how they live their life and how they work on their energy.
Yes.
So is that basically it?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
But it's just to add to that, yes, depending on what you eat, what you're doing at the time, where your thought processes are. Like one of my teachers said to me one day, what if what you call your God heard everything that you thought and considered that thought a request to give you that as your experience? Would you change the way that you think? And of course I said, yes. My point in that is thoughts delineate our energy intensity, let's put it that way.
Right.
But everyone having that unique fingerprint, they were seeking, as odd as this may sound, like they do the Dalai Lama, and they found my energetic imprint and said, this is the one that we choose. And then they drew me to them through that energy imprint. And that's how they even knew I was there at that day and that time.
Right.
By
Right.
the
Right.
same imprint, as
Right.
out there
They
as that sounds. But
right. They connected to the field of
yes,
consciousness,
yes,
found your DNA voice signature or your energy signature, and
yes.
then basically just send out the bat call.
Yeah, basically you could say that. Yeah,
Send out the bat call
they got into my spider web and went, come here.
and
Yeah.
said, "You need to come here. This is part of your." And is this something when they do this? Is this something that just all of a sudden they get in meditation?
Hmm.
Okay, so
In
they
essence,
they kind of get a new instruction like, "Oh, here's a new instruction for you. You need to find
yes,
Stephen to
yes,
complete his mission to study the scrolls." Okay,
yes.
so that kind of answers, and if you can expand on this, what was it about you that the lamas of Issa's monastery allowed you permission to the scrolls? Because not everybody gets permission. This is not a free-for-all zoo. So what was it about you that the lamas gave permission?
Well, I had been in India for quite some time before I had ever, they had spoken with me about them. Like in Nepal, southern Nepal, there's a lake that's known as Lake Issa, which is really got to make you wonder. But in any event, they educated me on different aspects. And then when they felt I was ready, however you do that, I mean, I understand that. I just don't want to get off on a tangent. They said one day that we were going to Tibet, to a place known as the Holy Cross Monastery, which is the actual first place that I saw the scrolls. The reason they don't just show them to everybody is because everybody has this idea that what they want to do is disprove it. They want to knock it down. They want to make sure that to them it's a lie. And I want all of your listeners to understand something. Once you've been in a monastery and once you understand the Buddhist train of thought, and it doesn't matter whether they're Zen or Tibetan or whatever faction it may be, they are meticulous record keepers. They don't do it to flaunt, prove, disprove anything to the world. They just do it for future studies, so that anybody that comes along in the future that's on a journey of consciousness, enlightenment, whatever it is that we wish to call it, they have resources that they can utilize. I also want to say that when I first got there, I had all of these little pads and pencils, and I was going to take all kinds of notes. And I remember my first session with one of the teachers, Lobsang. I had my little notepad and pencil in hand, and he said, no, no, no. He touched my hand. He said, no, 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 no. This is memory. You keep it in your mind, not on paper. And I thought, okay. And then he said, all ancient teachings were always verbal. They were never written. And I thought, okay, I can accept that. And so I just put my pencil and paper away, and they began to talk. So when we got to the Holy Cross Monastery in Tibet, getting back to where I was going, we go into the monastery, and Kaila, my lama or abbot, spoke with the abbot that was there in that one. And they brought a bunch of scrolls out, and an interpreter at first, because at that point I couldn't read Tibetan and or even Sanskrit. Can I now? Yeah, if I'm around it for a while.
What was it like when you were, okay, so your preview to an ancient document, you know, coming from your tradition of Catholicism, what was it like as you were kind of walking into that? And then, you know, it's kind of surreal. It's
Yes, it is.
Know.
Very much. I mean, needless to say, I mean, when I first found out who Yeshuah was and that he was there, and to think that Jesus was taught what he knew. I mean, think about that. That he did what he did, yes, but he was also taught in how to accomplish them, understanding energetics, vibration, how to maneuver it, use it, whatever you wish to call it.
Right.
And when they first brought these scrolls to me, I mean, I was literally shocked.
You must have been like floating in the air or something, like, oh,
yeah,
when am I gonna wake up? When am I gonna wake up?
Yeah, I wanted to pinch myself 4,000 or 5,000 times, yes.
Yeah.
But to actually read these, I mean, the Bible only says he was missing for 18 years, from the age of 18 until 31, but they never say where he went. Well,
there's big holes, yeah.
Yeah. And like I said, I didn't go to India. I mean, if any of you listening to the show, if you decide to go to India and you walk into Hemis, which we'll get to in a little bit, I suppose, and you say, I'd like to see the scrolls on Isha, they're going to look at you and go, who? What are you talking about? because they're not going to do that. Why? Like I said right in the get-go, is because everybody wants to go and disprove it.
Right.
They're not going to give you the opportunity.
Yeah, it's not a circus. It's not a
No,
circus show, and
no,
it's not for you to.
no,
They don't trust people
no.
to destroy it for their own egoic purposes. Or
Well, they've had enough experience on other things, and I won't even bother to go into those, even though I could, where science has come in, wanted to examine something, and next thing you know, part of what they had was gone. And the people doing the study were also gone. So you're right. They are trusting in their innocence, but they're not stupid.
That is a big difference. It's called
Yes.
discernment.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you
And
so
that
much.
is a spiritual lesson that
Yes.
people have to know is discernment. You know, I'm familiar with Issa's story growing up in Buddhism.
Yes.
And however, he is one of many teachers that we
Yes.
respect and we learn from.
Yes.
And for me, I grew up telling some of my Christian friends about Issa. And I know you're laughing because I got one of two things. I either got anger, which was most common,
Yes.
or I got that it fell on deaf ears. So, you know, they would say to me, your Issa may exist, but it's not the same Jesus. So like many Buddhists, I just moved on. It was just not worth it. However, I was delighted when the government of India published a documentary about Jesus as a Buddhist monk. And it healed for me a lot of discord that I had as a child. Growing up with Christian friends trying to convert me to Christianity for fear that I'm going to go to hell unless they save me. Okay, I know, but this is true. This is true.
No.
When you say it out loud, it sounds kind of ludicrous. So, you know, and they wanted me to reject the knowledge about the complete life of Issa. So I prefaced that with this question. And I honestly say this from the bottom of my Buddhist heart, okay? And I'm very open to different faiths. Why does the complete records of Issa's life anger so many Christians? Why don't they want to know his full life?
Well, I'm going to seemingly come at you as a Christian for a moment.
Please do. Answer honestly.
Which is well, I'm going to blatantly, and I would love for everybody in this world to hear this podcast, not because I'm on it, but because of the subject. If you question in any manner the idea of the Christ, then you don't have the faith, and they'll throw the idea of the faith of the mustard seed at you. And then they'll hit you with all you are is a sinner in your thoughts. And let's understand, everybody, one thing right now. If there is a sin, there is one, and it's the sin of separation from the divine. And all the divine ever wants, if there is a want by it, and I use that term loosely, it's for us to understand who we are, which Christ attempted to teach. Even if you were to sit down and read the Bible, if you understood Buddhism and you read the Bible, almost everything, and I'm not going to say 100%, but the vast majority of what he shared is based on Buddhist precepts. And it's not taking anything away from the one that Christianity calls Christ. No, it's just the opposite. It's just a huge thing. If everybody stepped back and thought, wow, he was taught. I mean, what do you think Christ meant in the Bible when he said, even the least among you may do these things and greater things may you do? You think he was lying or kidding? Yet Christianity itself wants you to believe that no, you can't. And if you attempt it, you're evil and a sin. Really? So no wonder people get accosted by even suggesting that there may be something different about Christ. In my book, A Metaphysical Interpretation of the Bible, I have a complete chapter devoted to the mystery of Jesus and who he is and what he's about. I see Christ as a great master teacher. Nobody's going to sit there and ever convince me that Christ did what he did so a religion would be made out of him. I've actually been asked this. You ready for this? That was Christ a Christian? And I look at him and go, what? Was Christ? Christ didn't even know what Christianity was.
Yeah.
And he would probably turn over and get vastly irritated if he knew another religion was made out of him. If you look back, even in the Bible, he was against religions. And everybody else to understand, please, Buddhism is not a religion. It's a philosophy, a way of living, a way of being, a way of accomplishing. And it's nothing other than that. I hope that answered your question. Sorry.
That was really beautiful. I actually brought tears. I love it. I was kind of trying to hold back a little bit tears because you don't know how many times
leave
Buddhist,
Christians up to me.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand the Bible. I can go toe to toe with a minister and have, and he'll quote scripture, and they get nervous when I quote a verse after or before, and they go, uh-oh. And what they do is they start listening. I love to play golf. And one day I was by myself in the pro shop. I'll give you a brief version of this. And the pro shop said, Stephen, hold on a second. There's a couple of gentlemen that want to join you. And as I looked, here comes two priests. And I looked up at the sky and I said, you're funny. You're really funny. And of course, in golf, you're playing and people go, well, what do you do? And I thought, uh-oh, here we go. But after we talked for the entire length of the golf course about Issa, who he was, what he was about, and you know, they still call me today and ask me if I want to play golf with them.
Yeah.
Because of what was shared and what they were told. And
it's probably healing for them too.
In a way, you could say that, yes.
Yeah.
Christ didn't do what he did to get people to think the way that they do. And he's no different than Lord Buddha. He really isn't. And by the way, the word Lord is just a 2nd century Greek word for I am. That's what that means. So when people say Lord Jesus Christ, they're saying I am Jesus. And they don't even know it. So when you're talking with Christians, they're coming from a system that is belief only.
Yeah, not practice and learn for yourself.
No, exactly. Not like Buddhism.
Test it out for yourself. We don't need to experience it.
No, if you test it out, you're in trouble. In Christianity. I'm not putting Christians down. In India, they have a saying that says there are many paths to the one God and all paths are acceptable.
Exactly. Yeah. Sorry about that. I just like, for many Buddhists, being told, and not even just Buddhists, but other people in other faith systems around the world, when they're friendly and they come across these different sects of Christianity followers and they respect it and they accept it, just like they have been with others. And yet there are outliers of people with issues of anything. But for the most part, many of them are very respectful. And there's a lot of countries around the world that have multiple faiths and they live and exist peacefully with one another. But, you know, I grew up here in America, and growing up, I'm like, oh, you guys want to talk about Issa? Okay, no problem. Let's talk about it. And I'm just, you know, really like excited to talk about another master teacher. And then I get the opposite back. And so like many, I've been told I'm going to go to hell. I'm a sinner. I'm, you know, just all these horrible things just to get me to convert. And this is damaging to people. And I'm a strong person. I know who I am and I know, you know, the Dharma and all that, but it still kind of hurts a little bit. So I say these questions because these answers a lot of things for people. So, like I said, this episode was a gift to me.
Mm-hmm.
But I have another question
Yes, ma'am.
for you as well. So we have the concept of Tulku children in Buddhism,
Mm-hmm.
and Jesus was a Tulku child sent from the
Yes.
source to
Yes.
taught metaphysics and
Mm-hmm.
consciousness in our schools. So, what did the scrolls that you read? And I think you said that you spent 6 years studying
A little over
um,
that, yes.
over that. So that's a long time to be studying, the same kind of scrolls. So, what did the scrolls say about baby Jesus's starseed origins and birth?
Well, that's a deep subject. Um, okay. Um, Three who didn't know each other initially. Three Vedic astrologers. Vedic astrology is very accurate. Just as an example, when the moment Siddhartha Buddha was born, his dad went to an astrologer to find out what his son was going to be. Dad didn't like the response, so he built what came to be known as the walled city. And I won't go into that. The Vedic astrologers knew a great master teacher was coming, and this was 500 years after Buddha. So they know, because of cycles, that an avatar, if you will, is entering reality, three-dimensional reality. So they knew that this avatar was coming in, and they knew he was coming into the Middle East. I mean, when these, quote, three kings, three wise men, whatever, were traveling and they were following a wandering star, Herod asked where this infant was born. I mean, if they were really following a wandering star, you got to ask yourself a question. Why did this king have to ask when there's this star floating around up there? No, that's not what happened. In any event, they knew he was coming, and much like they do the Dalai Lama, even to this day, they wanted to confirm that this was the chosen one, being somewhat humorous, if you will, uh, about things. And they confirmed that it was. And then they gave Mary and Joseph specific instructions of the schools that he was to attend and the places he was to go, to ensure that he would achieve the level of knowledge and ability that his destiny, if you will, was foretold to the astrologers. The gifts that supposedly Christianity says that they left, gold, frankincense, and myrrh, weren't items. Gold represented wisdom, knowledge. Frankincense was the ability to heal and understand. Myrrh was the true depth of compassion and what it can do for all of human
Right, right.
kind.
So the three wise men
Mm-hmm.
were monks that gave compassion, healing,
Wisdom,
I think it is, and
yes.
what was the third one?
And
Wisdom,
wisdom, yes.
wisdom. So compassion, healing, and wisdom.
Yes.
Those go hand in hand.
Yes, I know.
Yeah. So so they went there, and what did the scrolls say about the prophecy that he was supposed to fulfill?
Essentially that he was, and I'm really cutting it short, essentially that he was the next realm of teacher to raise the vibration of the planet. And I think about that. That's a huge deal. Here's one person that's going to lift the vibration of the then known world to a higher level of understanding, to be able to handle greater things, greater depth of comprehension,
Right.
was
And
all
how
what
is
he.
he supposed to do, like explain, because this is normal topic for me, like raising vibration of
Mhm.
people, raising the level of consciousness. So you know, so the monks went to, according to the scrolls, the monk went to see baby Jesus, give him his 3 gifts,
Mhm.
and then tell his parents the things that he was supposed to be fulfilling. How was he supposed to raise the consciousness of this planet? That's
By doing what he did.
okay.
All right, think about something.
And I don't want you to cut it short. Please just expand on it as you wish.
No, okay. I'm being candid with you. Think about something. Here's a person that could heal the sick, raise the dead, walk on water, feed the multitudes, which is, I still find most of that funny, but we'll stay with it, because that's not what it was.
What was it? Because people are going to
Okay,
ask that. Oh,
okay,
can you
all
walk
right,
on
all right.
water? You can't
Did he
walk on
walk on water?
water.
Yes. We have to understand something, and that's this, and I want everybody to hear this. And any of you can look this up in Genesis, if you will. After the human came into existence, God said in Genesis, "Now you are just like me, and that we have dominion over all things." Now, really think about that. This thing that we call God is the one that's saying this. We are just like it, in that we have dominion over all things. Not that we are better than, which is where the arrogance of humankind is today, and was back then as well, according to what I studied. And it was Christ's purpose was to show that we have this ability, we have this dominion. So let's talk about walking on water for a second. There's 2 ways we can look at that. One, water, metaphorically and metaphysically, always represents the idea of spiritual consciousness, higher thought. Okay. And him, in that context, walking on water meant that he was with and above the idea, not above as in what we know logically above, that he was a part of that higher idea of consciousness of self. He understood the full ability of the human. Now, let's take it in a literal context. All he did was change or shift the dynamics of what we know as water enough to hold his weight. You mean you can do that? Well, what is the idea of dominion over all things about? I mean, that's not me saying that. That's the Christian Bible saying that. So all
Right.
he's done is demonstrate what human is quite capable of being. We cannot, even if we look at Buddha, and we can go through any and all of the avatars that have ever lived, and there are more of them than what we know about. They all had to, at some point, wrestle with their own ego. Buddha finally got upset and sat down under the banyan tree and, forgive my lack of language, went, "This is a bunch of horse hockey. None of this works. I've done everything, and it's all just a bunch of poop." And in that moment, he let everything go, and he became known as the Buddha. All right, Christ wrestled with Satan, so to speak, which in ancient Sanskrit, Satan is described as the ego. Okay, so he wrestled with his ego, doing the same thing.
Yes.
You have all this power, you have all this ability, man, you could own the world, you could control the world. That was him having a conversation with himself.
That's another misconception that I found very fascinating in Western spiritual or religious traditions is this concept of hell and Satan as almost kind of as a fear strategy to
It is.
and I'm always like, that's basically your ego
Yes.
has gone out of control. You're afraid of your own
Yes.
ego and your own shadow. So if
Yes.
you can see it for what it is, then you can transcend it. And that's part of the
Yes.
lesson.
Yes. Good for you. In the scrolls,
Well, I
but
send a lot of people to the other side. So
all right. This, if I do not see the ego as the enemy, it is not. The ego is one of the greatest teachers human has, depending on what you do with it. In the Christian faction, it's called the tempter. Well, what does the ego do? Doesn't it tempt people? Of course it does. But the idea of the temptation is not to do it. It's to use the idea of the temptation as your teacher to show you where the individual could rise above the lower physiological idea of self. We are not just a body.
Right.
I don't care how any person looks in a physiological sense. I don't care what color you are. I don't care where you're from. It makes no damn difference because all of those are based on ego and the
Right.
limitation in which we
Right.
live. So my point in this is in those scrolls, Jesus learned to master the ego and use the ego as it should be as the teacher to
Right.
teach the
It's one of
person.
the three gifts. It's called wisdom
Yes,
teachings. It's
yes,
the wisdom to see through the illusion,
yes,
and
yes.
learn the lesson. So that, and the thing with the scrolls and the teachings about the ego being the teacher is, he made peace with the ego, or did he completely push it aside for the rest of his life? Did they say anything about
No,
that?
no, no, yes, here's the simple version. Um, as we learn to operate and use the ego as the teacher, and as we overcome every one of our individual temptations, which we all have them, do I take this drink or not? Do I see if I can get in this girl's clothes or not? Those are all ego-based things, okay? As you work with each one, and usually the ego plays on insecurities, and then as you work through each one of those insecure views, ideas, perceptions, whatever you want to call them, and let's say you get through 100% of those, then the ego, you become the master of it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
now it operates with you. If we look at the idea in the scrolls, it talked much about positive and negative forces, positive and negative energetics. They are everywhere. They are in everything. If you look, water is a negative charge. Land is a positive charge. Left brain, a positive charge. Right
Right.
brain, a negative charge. And when you learn to master those dynamics, and the ego is the biggest interference to keep one from doing it, because
Right.
you cannot have an ego and rely on ego and have ultimate, I'm going to say, authority. You cannot, because of what you would do with it. And
Right.
that cannot and will not be allowed. I don't care who you are. Every evil person that's ever lived, Adolf Hitler is an example. He wanted this knowledge. No, they would never find it in a bazillion years.
Did the Nazis come? What did the scroll say about the Nazis visit? Can you give us a quick?
They were in India. They were scouring. But you know what? The last place, Buddhists or monks, monasteries are very welcoming. They'll welcome you in, they'll feed you, they'll do anything you did. And in those days, knowledge of those scrolls were very limited. Not that it didn't exist. Henry Roerich, Franklin Notovich are two that were both Russian that had opportunity to view these scrolls pre-World War II, but the knowledge of these scrolls was not all that well known. Point being is Nazi Germany didn't know anything about them. And even if they had have, they probably would have never found them anyway, because the monks, they can play very naive positions. Let's put it that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm glad that, because there's a lot of stories about the Nazis coming through and just squandering, and I'm glad that the most precious material was
Well,
not found.
they were looking for money, wealth, gold.
Of course, they were looking for third dimensional
Yes,
things, physical
yes,
things, because they're
yes,
materialistic. But the
yes.
the real gold,
They
the
never found.
is the scrolls, is the
Yes.
wisdom teachings
Yes.
of
Exactly.
how to master consciousness
Self.
and the matrix and the self. Yeah, that's
Well, if you don't master self, you can master nothing else, and it's as simple as that.
right,
And
right,
and the scrolls very heavily talked about that. That's why they talked about the ego in the manner in which they did. It's a tool. It's
right,
a divine tool.
right.
It's not our enemy.
Right, and this is very advanced studies in metaphysics in all traditions, not just Buddhism. We just happen to have so much because you said earlier we're meticulous documenters, and we just keep
Yes.
adding and adding and adding
Yes.
to further our understanding of consciousness, metaphysics, and our reality. But um, when you get into the wisdom teachings and you get into consciousness, the only thing there is consciousness. The only
Yes.
thing there is the universal one mind, is the Lord God, whatever you want to
Yes.
place it. And when you get into that, that is where the value. Everything else in physical is just malleable because you
Right.
can change, just kind of like with the water.
Mm-hmm.
You can change the atomic structure of things
Mm-hmm.
to manipulate it how you need. And that's
Yes.
very, very advanced stuff. So I don't want to get into the six senses of Buddhism. I think I have a question for you a little bit later on that, which I am working with. But what did the scrolls say about Issa's birth name going from Yosef bin Yosef, which is Yoshef, and then bin bin, and then Yosef Yoshes. So Joseph, or Joseph of Joseph is how it's translated. So what did the scroll say about that name going from Yosef bin Yosef to Yeshua bin Yusuf after attending the Alanapis mystery school in Egypt, which was one of the things that he was supposed to do to fulfill the prophecy according to the scrolls, and the three wise men that told his parents that he has to go to Egypt for the mystery school. So what did it say about attending the mystery schools?
Well, first off, let's take these in pieces, please.
Yes.
Um, in ancient times, it was very customary to, as one grew in knowledge and stature, to change their name, not to hide anything or to pull any shenanigans. It's just shows a shift in understanding, if you will. So Yosef ben Yosef actually interprets into, loosely, Joseph, son of Joseph. So Jesus's birth name was Joseph, not Jesus. He became known as Jesus after his first graduation ceremony in the mystery schools in Heliopolis, Egypt, Alexandria, Egypt, to be specific.
Wait. So the mystery schools name him Jesus, or they name him Yeshua?
They named him, okay, all right, Yeshua is his
Yeshua.
name, yes.
So the name
G,
Jesus came back later on, by the Romans, right?
yes,
Okay, just want to make the distinction.
actually to be specific, by Paul.
Oh, okay. Well, we're going to get into that. So carry on. I just wanted to make that distinction.
And part of the reason, Jesus had to fulfill prophecy, just like Buddha did, prophecy to a point. And according to the Jewish prophecies, the Messiah, if you will, was going to come out of Egypt. Okay, so he had to go there first. So he went there first to learn in the mystery schools, which, by the way, is where he had his first encounter with Mary Magdalene, because she was also a student at the mystery schools in Heliopolis.
Smart lady.
Very. She's a lot greater than most people tend to think. In fact,
Yeah.
until Pope Gregory the Great, she was a very revered woman. And because of the competition she was giving with the Gnostic path to the Catholic Church, Gregory the Great dubbed her as a prostitute.
It's a PR campaign to
Yes.
devalue her
Yes.
acumen.
Yes.
But in Buddhism, Miriam, I think Miriam was her original name.
Miriam was her name, just like
Yosef.
yes. Uh,
So
when he
so they met at school. They met
yes,
at the mystery school.
sure, yes,
So why did her name change as the same reason?
yes, accomplish higher levels of knowledge, higher wisdom. These people in those days were metaphysically tested at what they could do,
How do they
what they
test them? How do
oh I couldn't tell you how they tested them. I wasn't there myself,
I know.
but
I just wonder if
but
the
I
scroll said anything.
no, because that was in Egypt. That wasn't in India.
Mm,
They tracked only what he was doing, like the cave he meditated in for
right.
6 straight months. Um, that's documented that he sat in this thing for 6 straight months uh, for his meditation practices.
Right. So they just
Okay.
document what's going on at their schools
And
and with
yes,
their students.
yes,
Anything outside of that in other schools,
was they could care less.
yeah. Okay, carry on.
Why do you want me to get up and jump around? What? No, I'm okay.
No,
I'm
okay, so
kidding.
I do have another question.
Sure.
So I was wondering if there's more to that story. So,
There
um,
is. There is.
what's the rest of that story?
I kind of forgot where I was.
Oh, Mary Magdalene and Yusuf
Yeah.
meeting at the mystery schools in Egypt.
And they were tested in ability of self. Let's put it that way.
Six
Uh,
senses.
yes.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Intuitive sense, awareness, and we can go on and on with that.
Right, right.
And then as they accomplish their grade, in essence, unlike today, because of the level of knowledge and wisdom, their names were shifted
Mm,
from Joseph to Yeshua, and from even in India. And in India, Issa is just an interpretation of Yeshua.
mm-hmm.
That's all it is.
Right.
I mean, my name is pronounced different in India than it is here. And
Yeah,
even in Tibetan, it's pronounced different, which is fine. And
yeah.
by the way, we were talking about meticulous record keepers. Any person in the United States, if you were to be able to review scrolls, you would find my name in several monasteries.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mind saying, if you're ever over there stumbling around for whatever
Sure.
reason,
Fact checked it.
yeah, you can
Go
fact check
ahead.
me. It's Darjeeling. You'll find my name in the scrolls. You'll find it in the Holy Cross Monastery and the Hemis Monastery in Leh or Ladakh.
Right.
There was a
Same as Issa, because
yep,
he is in many different documents as well. He's in the
yes,
Quran, he's in Hindu text, he's in,
yes,
the Buddhist text, he's
yes,
in many different ones. And
yes.
so there's just so much material to further fact check. So, you know,
See, going back to what you were mentioning earlier, Christianity thinks they own him. No, they
yeah, what
don't.
is up with that? What is up with that?
Well,
Because we don't own him. Nobody
no,
owns
nobody
anybody.
exactly.
Nobody owns spirituality. So what is
Oh
up with
no,
that?
Christians. I mean, for goodness sake, and I'm not intentionally putting you down because you're very special people in your own way. You just don't realize that. Nobody owns anyone, and especially a great master such as that. The reason they do that is because they don't. And modern and understand something. When the Bible was first created, people have just followed it for centuries without ever questioning it, and that's a story in itself.
Yeah,
And why they don't, because you could have been literally killed and burned and tortured and burned at the stake if you did in the early times.
right.
And then they just accepted it as, pardon my pun, the gospel. And they've taught it exactly the way it was originally taught. And what they had was an illusion in the first place. And that can be documented if people want to go out there and look. I'm not downplaying Christianity again. That's not my intention. Truth is the intention. Mother Nature is what she is.
Okay, so Now, the next question I have for you is, what does the scrolls say about Issa returning from the crucifixion with John the Baptist, Thomas, and Mary? And do the scrolls say anything about who supposedly died on the cross?
Well, first off, nobody actually died on the cross, at least of ways if we're talking about Issa or Yeshua. How do we know that? If anybody knows basic physiology and the biblical story that's presented, you would know, and here's why. When Christ supposedly had passed away, the Roman centurion pierced his side with a spear, correct? Do you know the story?
I've heard, but I'm not exact on the story, so please tell
Okay,
it
all
for people
right.
who aren't
Okay.
familiar.
Anyway, he pierced Christ's side with a spear, and Christ bled. Well, anybody in the medical field knows that a dead person does not bleed at all. And there were a lot of things that happened that day that ordinarily do not happen. And here's just a brief version. And part of this, you have to study the history of Rome to understand it. When a person was taken off of the cross, 100% of the time, their knees were broken. Christ, they didn't. And by the way, I'm going to backpedal for just a second, because there's more to this story than meets the eye. Am I calling it a crock or a bunch of baloney? No, it's just the truth. And the point, if understood, is well intended and serves the purpose. And here it is. Nobody going through a crucifixion was ever allowed anything to drink while they were on the cross. Christ was saying he was thirsty. Interesting. Joseph of Arimathea, by the way, who happens to be Christ's uncle, and there's more to that story than meets the eye, was there, and he told the Roman centurion that the bowl that he had in his hand was a bowl of vinegar, and that if he stuck the sponge into Christ's mouth, it would make his thirst worse. The centurion fell for it. Put the sponge in Christ's mouth, just as the Bible says. That is true. And then within moments, Christ went out. In other words, he was knocked out. If we also look at scripture before that event, it says in the Bible, Eloi, Eloi, Yama Sabachthani, which according to them is my God, why hast thou forsaken me? That's not what Christ said. Christ said, Eloi, Eloi, why have you forsaken me? Eloi, he was talking about his teachers from Heliopolis, thus Eloi.
Yeah, that makes so much sense.
Joseph of Arimathea also had attended Heliopolis, and he was there, gave him the sponge, knocked him out, took him down, and the only person that they gave the body to once they took him down was the wife of the person on the cross, and they gave the body to Mary Magdalene.
So they did get married.
Yes.
Yeah.
They had 3 children.
That's one of the questions, is that 3, and the children that they have, does the scrolls say, what?
No.
It just says they got married, they had 3 children.
No, the scrolls don't necessarily say that. There are other documents that do.
Oh, okay.
See, once Christ was taken down, he and Mary Magdalene, they returned to India. And instead of hanging around in the Middle East, I mean, for goodness sakes, he was supposed to be dead, so he had to disappear. And of course they did. And when they went back to India, yes, the scrolls do talk about their return. They do talk about them being married, and they do talk about the children.
Does this say anything about what happened to the children, or, I mean?
Does it? Yes.
What does it say about the children?
ultimately, the scrolls stop when the children, and I remember two of the names. I don't remember the middle child. The first child born is Sarah, or Sarah, as it's pronounced in this part of the world. The second child was another daughter, and I don't remember her name, but the third child was a son, and his name was Boaz, B-O-A-Z. And when they left, the children, when they left India, they journeyed towards Europe.
And that's where it ends?
That's where it ends. That's where the scrolls don't go any further than that.
Right, right. We
And
just
what
record our
happened to them,
area. Yeah.
yes. And there are factions that talk about the Merovingian line in France that are supposed to be the line of the children.
Did Mary and Issa follow the children? Because kind of grandparents kind of do that a little bit.
No. Yeah, I hear you. In modern times they do. In ancient times, not necessarily.
Okay.
No,
okay.
In fact, it was for safety reasons that, because people aren't aware of this, but Christ was almost killed in India when he was talking with, what were they? I think I want to say the Sikh faction about
Right.
The truth of the priests that they had, and
Well, that kind of goes into my next question.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Okay, because there's according to the country of India's documentary on this, the board of directors are comprised of Sunni Muslims who care for the supposed remains of Issa at the Rosabal Shrine in Kashmir,
That's correct.
India.
That's correct.
Okay, and
by the way, that is true.
Okay, so the Rosabal Shrine has a tomb of a man called Issa,
Yep.
that died about 2,000 years ago, and the rock carving is an image of a man with crucifixion wounds on his feet and buried in the Jewish tradition of directions.
Yes.
So did you visit the tomb and kind of, can you tell us a little bit more about your thoughts? Because it's not open to the public anymore.
No. It was very select few anyway that could even go in there. Being a monk and having the robes on of a monk, I mean, it has its advantages. Even when it came to the scrolls, they were very willing to give them to me. When we arrived, as an example, and this is before we got to Kashmir, which is where the tomb is. When we got to the Hemis monastery, they already had the scrolls ready for me to review, because they knew we were coming and they knew that I was with them. I was, in those years, I was probably the only
white guy that's ever been there.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I love it. Yeah.
There's no shame of being a white guy in India.
No, I know it's not, but I was where I was going is I know for a fact that I was the only white guy that was a monk, for sure.
Did the scrolls ever say anything about what race Issa supposedly was, or is that something not relevant?
Yes. Think of an Arab, and their dark complexion.
So it's not this blonde, blue-eyed guy
Lord,
that you see in these
I laugh
pictures.
Yeah, I laugh so much at that. That's ridiculous.
So he looks like a normal Arab.
Yeah. He was brown-skinned, brown-eyed, long hair. I mean, as brown skin as you can get.
Yeah.
And
what about Mary? Same thing, or?
Yes, she's Middle Eastern. She didn't have blonde hair and blue eyes either.
Yep.
The way they portray these people is so ridiculous. You would think that people would get it right off the bat, but they don't.
Yeah.
That's why Christ said, if the blind lead the blind, shall they both surely not fall in the ditch?
Probably. But
he said that.
Yeah, no. I was saying, yeah, probably they would fall in the ditch. But
indeed.
So when they talk about him being Western, he's Western from the Arab.
Yes.
Western to India, not
Right.
Western to Europe, to
No,
Eurasia. Okay.
no. When they talk about the three wise men from the Orient, yeah, okay, I get it. I know where
Close.
they get that from. It's not quite as in China
Yeah.
or Japan, but it is, if you will, the Orient by reference to the Middle East.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Just like Jesus was not Western as an American or European. No,
He's Middle Eastern,
he was west of India.
west of India. Thank you for clarifying that, because that is a misconception
Yes.
that I always found so fascinating in the artwork, because I study art history. I'm like, oh, that makes no sense. Let me ask you this. What was
Always
the,
follow that, by the way.
what?
When you're studying something that's supposed to be the truth and you say it makes no sense, follow that.
Follow that lead, yeah.
Yes.
Because it should fact check.
Yeah. No,
It
no,
should,
no, no.
it should,
Fact check today is a very common thing.
it should back up, back up.
Yes. Just find the truth. You know, we can refer to it as any way that we want, but fact check, how are you going to, even from, I've had people ask me, did you fact check the scrolls? Oh yeah. Like who am I going to talk with?
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I want to know, because energy healing is very common, and there's a lot of
Yes.
modalities for
Yes.
energy healing, and there's even more today. What are the most popular healing modalities that Issa used? Did it ever
Reiki.
say?
Reiki.
Reiki.
Yes.
Still practiced today, Reiki. And it was,
Yes.
we found in the early 19th century from another Buddhist monk in Japan who refound it and
Mm-hmm.
made it popularized. So
Us,
Reiki,
yeah.
wonderful.
Usui. Usui Reiki.
Okay. Now, with respect to Christianity, most Christian sects diverge from Catholicism and the King
Mm-hmm.
James Version of the Bible. Now,
Mm-hmm.
why did they completely reject Issa's scholarly years in Buddhist monasteries and his latter years after the crucifixion? Why did they completely remove the teachings of having an awakening, working on your ascension, getting into
Well, that's easy.
consciousness? Hold
That
on.
that
Out of
yeah.
Issa's
Okay.
teaching, and
Okay.
instead, they added the mythology of the Son of God, and they removed the teachings about everyone being a fractal expression or a piece of consciousness itself. So, and that everyone has the ability to attain their spiritual gifts in this holographic matrix that we share. So, why the belittlement of humanity? Why this PR campaign for control of the populace, and especially of women? So it's
You
kind of a
you
long-winded question. So,
no, you just hit it right there. Control. It was always about control.
mhm,
When we look at when the early churches were found, I mean, come on, think about it. The Bible wasn't even bothered to be put together until
500
300
years.
years, three to
Mhm,
500 years after
mhm,
that's subject. I'll take that. 300 to 500 years after the supposed passing of Christ. What took him so long? In fact, if you really look at it and did the homework, even the Gospels, as we know them to be, all dated 75 to almost 100 years after supposedly the crucifixion. What took him so long? So that tells you already that Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John didn't write them
mhm,
unless
mhm.
they had the ability to overcome what we refer to as death.
Right.
Okay. So the whole thing is put together, and we can thank Paul for his desire to be in power and authority, and I'll just put it that way.
So Paul, not to make
Yes,
Paul the bad guy. There is a teaching, there's a lesson to be learned in this, but
yes, there is.
Paul Paul mistold a lot of this, and then did a PR
On
campaign against
purpose,
Mary
on
for his,
purpose.
and what was his one purpose?
Power and control. He wanted to control the masses, which is something that Christ was totally against. And any Christian would agree with that. Yet when they started putting the Bible and the church together, it was about power and control. Think about something here for a second,
Yeah.
and that's that that's that in the early kingdoms, the Catholic Church was the very people that were the tax gatherers.
Mm,
Here's these people
mm,
that could not only take your land and your wealth, but they could take your soul. And they could throw you to this place that was known as hell, which in those days, think about it, dark ages,
yeah.
superstitious period of time. So what they did is they usurped one superstition for another one. There is no hell.
Mm-hmm.
There is no Satan. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, if people stopped and thought about it for 1 second, you mean to tell me this thing that we call God created human along with Satan, its arch enemy, and it wanted to play ping pong, and it's going to use the human as the ball? Makes no
Yeah.
sense to me. That's not
Yeah.
much in the way of divine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No. All right. So in that,
So this
uh,
concept of hell and demons again is just another
it's,
aspect of the PR campaign to control
yes,
people.
yes. All right. Look at it this
Mm-hmm.
way.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Christ very specific. Anybody look it up. Matthew, when it was inquired of him about forgiving sins, he's very specific. And I quote, man cannot forgive another man's sins. Only God the Father can do that. And I challenge any Christian out there to look that up. And that's exactly what you're going to read. All right. So if man cannot forgive man's sins, what are Catholics doing? What are the priests doing forgiving sins when they have no authority according to Christ? They don't, but they're doing it. And keeping in mind, as was said earlier, there's really only one sin, and that's the illusion of separation. And then when you take a look at the Inquisitions, in answer to your question about women, the vast majority of people, which is over 10 million, and I'm not kidding, the vast majority of those 10 million that were tortured and killed at the hands of the Catholic Church were women. People don't realize that the early churches had more devices of torture than all the nations combined on the planet, even to this day. And they used them during a period they called the Inquisitions. That's where women were locked, if you will. Women are the part of the equation that creates divine. We have it internally and externally. And it's as simple as that. The authority is being given to women in present times if we were to just take a look at what's going on. Feminine power, which scared the
Ancient
early
times.
church.
Yeah.
Yes, the ancient times.
Yeah.
Feminine power is finally coming back into her own.
Right.
And I'm so pleased that that's happening
Yeah.
because
It
it's
is.
about time.
It's happening, and I speak a lot about the female Buddhas like Tara and Kuan Yin and others. But
Absolutely.
and Miriam is a wonderful female Buddha as well. If you want
Yes,
to label it as that, and
absolutely.
if we had a history where powerful, beautiful, intelligent women were allowed to express themselves fully without any kind of
Hmm.
negative PR campaign, we may have a completely different outcome.
We would have had a
We
different
would have had
outcome.
a different outcome.
But that being said, as you know, there are no coincidences. There are no
Yeah,
accidents. Everything happens for a reason. So even in that, that took place for a reason. And
it's a
I
hard
can
lesson.
no, it has its purpose. And here's the purpose. If you want everybody to wake up to divine nature, then it cannot be the simplest thing. Well, it can be the simplest, but not necessarily the easiest. A question I learned a long time ago, which was posed to me by one of my teachers from India, is this. Let's say that you're God,
Mm?
no, excuse me, you're goddess.
Expression. Mhm.
Yes, yeah. Um, and you created all of humanity in your image and in your likeness. And that being said, you wanted them to become just like you. That would mean you would have to put it somewhere where your creation would find it. So here's my question. How would you do it and where would you put it?
And women.
Would you? I like it. Good response. No. What you would do would be this. you would make it so simple that nobody would believe it. And the second thing that you would do is you would put it in plain sight where everybody could see it.
Ah, yes, that's a good one. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and that's the truth. And you want to know, not only did I get that from Lobsang and my teachers, but I later got it when I was getting my master's in religion and theology. It's actually in the Bible itself. It says that.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Yes, it would be in women. Why? Innocence. You have to do it innocently. And there's no other way. Innocently and openly. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, really, really good. I can really go off on that one,
Me
but I'm
too.
gonna go. But for the sake of time, I'm going
Yes.
to ask this question. I was
Yes,
told by monks growing up that his name Jesus is Latin for fake Messiah,
ma'am.
which was changed from Yeshua, which you have verified that was given to him in Egypt, was changed from Yeshua to Jesus, or Jeshua to Jesus, to
Mm-hmm.
remove the lineage out of his name. So
Yes.
it was almost as an inside Roman joke to call him Jesus, which is fake Messiah. So what are your thoughts on this concept that his true name was rebranded as Jesus so that people can be calling him fake Messiah? What are your thoughts on that?
Huge. But if
Because
you think,
in Latin, that's what it means.
no, I know that.
Blesses, blesses.
That's the reason I'm sitting here smiling, going, "Whoa, she's done her homework."
Oh yeah. Oh, I've
No,
been told I was going to go to hell for a very long time, so this is
well, you
my.
know what? You know what? If you do, one, I'll see you there, and two, if you do, walk through the place like you own it, and they'll leave you alone.
But anyways, yes, please answer
No,
that question
okay, all
about
right.
blesses Jesus.
That's simple. Isn't that in a roundabout way saying that all of Christianity is following a fake Christ?
Mm,
And isn't that make in a roundabout way saying that
making fun of it all.
that what's being taught is not true?
Mm,
So that's one way to look at it. And again, I have no axe to grind with Christianity,
right.
and it's just that I've been told, probably similar to you, that I was following a fake path that was going to lead me into hell. And
Right.
I've been told that by ministers.
Yeah. Yeah. Who never really saw the scrolls or
No, no,
anything like that.
I have no
Yeah.
idea. Have
I
no
always call
idea.
him Yeshua because that's more
Yes,
respectful. That's his real name. That
that is
or
his real name.
Joseph. But I never really call him. I can't make myself. For the purpose of this episode, I'll call him Jesus. But I can't make myself do that because I know
You know
that
what it means.
I know what it means, and I know that's a
Yes,
disgrace to the lineage. Okay, well that
yes.
answers that question. So let me ask you this: what does the scroll say about Yeshua's last name is Christ? How is it related to Krishna? Krishna in the Hindu Vedas. Is it like
well,
Christ
well,
and Krishna for
well,
like the
first off,
crystalline
first,
consciousness, Christ-like?
wait. All right,
No.
I love it. Christ was not his last name.
We're going to break down the bad PR campaign right now
Yeah,
and
no,
clarify the campaign.
I hope. I would love to see it broken down.
We're going to
And
break it down. We're going to.
well, there's a funny thing. Ancient wisdom says that the truth shall always be made known, and sooner or later, the truth will be made known as that. Um, Now, in response to the question that you asked me, the name Krishna and Christ, last name, I love it. Uh,
They had a pretty
well,
good
no,
drinking party coming up with these names, by the way.
I'm sure they did. I can imagine all the Catholic monks sitting around drinking wine, going, "Hey, I've got a hell of an idea. Let's say this." Um, but no, Krishna in Hindi is the exact same meaning as Christ. There's no difference. In fact, one of the things I suggested to you on the phone, and you can and you can Google it, so people can check it out. But there's a place in India called Jerusalem. Now, that's really close to Jerusalem. Am I saying that all this other stuff about Christ is not real? No, I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying it's all valid. But I am also saying find out the truth for yourself. Because if you just follow along blindly, then you may be following an illusion. Buddhism is a philosophy. It's a way of being. It's a way of life. It's not about power and control. It's not about saying to you, you have to do this, you must do that. If you don't, you're going here, or you don't, you're going there. Buddhism has nothing like that. Yet, there are some factions in this world that believe that having power over people is the most important thing, and that's not true. All teachings, if I might, all teachings outside of the idea of Buddhism are about keeping you away from who you are. Some philosophies would tell you, you can't be this, you can't be that. That's not true. I cannot find anywhere in ancient texts that divine creator said anything like that. If anything, it's always been just the opposite of that. That it wants us to be like it, that it wants us to follow that divine nature within us. It's our gift, and it's our gift to share it with people without fear. It's nothing to hide from. It's nothing to stay away from. It's you already. Christ himself said in the Bible that when asked, you look here and you look there for the kingdom of heaven, yet you do not look within you. If God's in heaven and heaven is within you, then Buddha and all the other teachers were correct. It is us. It is who you are. Right. So that being said,
everybody will and can attain Christ's consciousness.
Yes, ma'am.
Or be Christ-like is another way of saying it, but it's basically like Krishna.
No, it's like Christ consciousness is what it is. It is what it is. It's us. It's who we are.
Is it like the crystalline nature of who we are?
Yes, perfect. Okay. I like it.
Perfect. I like it. We're on the same wavelength.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we barely scratch
I know that.
How deep our conversation can go. And we presented a lot of valuable information for people to gnaw on.
Indeed.
And everything that Dr. Hairfield writes about is about awakening and also how to free yourself of perceived burdens.
Yes.
So when you master your own incarnation. So for more information, everybody, from Stephen Hairfield's offerings, go to his website, which is Hairfeild, just like it sounds, .com. And Dr. Hairfield, thank you again for a fantastic interview. It was especially healing for me.
You have great energy, and you keep going no matter what people want to confront you with. The illusion always diminishes in the face of light and truth.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That's very, very good words to take home with you and with me. And so again, for everyone else, thank you so much for listening to another enlightening conversation. Until next time, blessings.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Merkaba Chakras, where we talk Buddhism in the 5th dimension. For more information about today's guest, please go to the show description. For more information about Vaughn's metaphysical work, please go to merkabachakras.com. The views expressed today are for entertainment purposes and do not necessarily reflect the views of the host or replace any medical or legal advice. Don't forget to subscribe for more interviews about the 5th dimension. Until we meet again, blessings.